As Josh finished the recording, he was trying to figure out what he had just read, and he wasn't even sure he wanted to upload the video. So many questions swirled around in his mind, but where to begin? The first thing he had to do was search the web for any mention of this Heath Borjears person. The name itself was so odd that any search results would most likely be easy to sort through. Unfortunately, things wouldn't be that simple. After an hour of searching through old newspapers and forums he usually used to help him in his research for videos, he was unable to find even a trace of the name Heath Borjears. Even searching for the mentioned names and locations yielded no useful results. He was just about to give up and brush it off as nothing more than a prank being pulled by one of his friends who had found the book and decided to have some fun, when a newspaper headline caught his eye. 100-year-old grave vandalized and robbed. The headline itself was enough to make his heart race, but the even bigger thing was the date listed on the article, August 12, 1964, just 2 days after the entry in the journal. He clicked on the link and began reading the article with an excitement he hadn't felt in a long time. Killbuck, Ohio. A freshly dug grave in the cemetery in Killbuck caught the eye of the groundskeeper this morning as he was making his rounds and checking on a site for an upcoming burial. Frank Fields, who has managed the cemetery for the past 20 years, said he has caught people in the past attempting to dig up graves, but this was the first time someone has managed to get away with it. Most people don't realize how difficult it is to dig up a grave, the old keeper said. They typically get started, and by the time the morning comes around, I find them laying on the ground wishing they had chosen an honest living. The vandalized grave belonged to John Smith, who passed away in 1862. Mr. Smith was not well known in the area, and upon being exhumed today, it appears the robbers took his arms and leg bones. The reason for this is unknown, though Mr. Fields has an idea. They most likely want to sell them on the black market to make some kind of drug. Maybe they selected this grave because they figured no one would notice. Josh's eyes widened as he finished reading. This had to be the wildest thing he'd ever stumbled on, and it was all due to a random entry in a journal he accidentally found. What was his grandfather doing in possession of the journal in the first place? Where exactly had it come from? He knew that there wouldn't be an answer to these questions, at least not tonight. It was getting late, and even with the excitement of what he had found, Josh was starting to feel the call of his pillow. Securing the old journal in his desk, he got up and walked down the hall to the bathroom to get ready for bed. Looking in the mirror as he brushed his teeth, he couldn't help but smile at what he imagined was going to be a fun mystery to unravel. The morning sun broke through the window much earlier than Josh would have liked. The same nightmare that had been plaguing him for months had made sleep difficult, and facing the day seemed like a monumental task. Then he remembered the events of the night before. Was the whole thing just a dream? Did he really discover the answer to a 60-year-old grave robbery and subsequently open the door to a new mystery? No one would possibly believe he had found the journal with that entry already in it, especially since there seemed to be no record of the writer anywhere. Hell, he didn't even believe it, since he knew with a high degree of certainty that it had been empty when he found it. Climbing out of bed, Josh made his way to the shower and began considering what he should do. Authorities wouldn't care because of how long ago the crime had happened. He could record a new video and share what he had learned with his audience, especially since he had found out so much since recording the initial video of him reading the journal. That probably made the most sense. But then, what would be the point? Even with the newspaper article, there wasn't a whole lot to back up the story. The warm water of the shower helped him to wake and clear his head. Documenting what was going on would be a good idea, and maybe someone in his audience would have some expertise he lacked to track down who Heath Borjears was. Climbing out of the shower, now with a solid plan of action, he stopped in his tracks and nearly stumbled back into the tub. The steam from the shower had fogged up the mirror over the sink, revealing the words Killbuck Cemetery in the haze. Regaining his composure, Josh reached over to check the door of the bathroom. It was still locked. No one else could have gotten in here, so how had those words appeared on the mirror? More importantly, why those words? Reaching for his towel, he quickly cleared the mirror off and then escaped to his bedroom to get dressed. A quick bite to eat, followed by filming and pretending he hadn't seen what he had seen, was the new plan. Obviously, a lack of sleep was causing him to see things that weren't there, and dumping all of his thoughts into a video would help clear his mind and maybe help him get some rest later on. Getting dressed and heading to the kitchen, Josh made himself some eggs and toast, washing it down with some of the best orange juice he could ever remember having. As he sat down at his desk to turn on his computer and work on a new video, he heard a loud pop come from the basement, followed by the room going dark. "You've got to be kidding me." He was almost ready to just go back to bed at this point, but the fuse box had blown before, and he knew it was probably just a tripped fuse. All he needed to do was go down to the basement and flip a switch and the power would be restored. Grabbing a flashlight from the kitchen, he walked over to the basement door and reached for the knob, hesitating for a moment before turning it and pulling the door open slowly. The stairs were much darker than he remembered, and the flashlight didn't seem to be doing much to push the shadows away. Reaching the bottom, he started making his way through the musty room towards the fuse box. Reaching the box, he couldn't help but laugh at himself for the illogical fear the lower level brought out in him. There was, after all, nothing to be scared of down here except the furnace, the washer and dryer, and seemingly hundreds of boxes of holiday decorations that spent most of the year in the dark. Opening the fuse box, he quickly found the main fuse and switched it back on. A light on the other side of the room, coming from the top of the stairs, told him it worked. As he made his way back across the basement, an uneasy feeling filled him, like someone was following him towards the staircase. His pace quickened as he reached the bottom of the stairs, and he stepped up them 3 at a time until he reached the top, quickly closing the door behind him and locking it. The lock had been there for many years, meant to keep young children from getting hurt, but today it was more to help Josh calm his nerves. Heading back to the office, he once again sat down to record, waiting for his heart to slow down as the computer booted up. Just before the login screen appeared, another pop from the basement plunged the room back into darkness. This time, the thought of going into the basement contained the very real threat that someone was down there, toying with him and possibly planning something. The more he thought about it, the more he was sure he had heard footsteps behind him when he was down there, and the more nervous he was about going back. His contemplation was cut short by the sound of his phone vibrating on the desk. Peering down at the notification, he was once again surprised to see the words Killbuck Cemetery written out, this time as a text message from an unknown number. Someone had to be messing with him at this point. But who? Sitting around and wondering wasn't going to help him get any closer to the truth, and he wasn't going back into the dark basement to flip the breaker again. So that only left one option. Grabbing his phone and keys, he made his way out to the car. He had been to Killbuck a few times, usually passing through on his way from a friend's house or to film, but he hadn't stopped in the cemetery before. Maybe whoever had set up this overly elaborate hoax would be there waiting on him. It had to be someone he knew, but his small friend group didn't include any pranksters that he was aware of. As he started the car and pulled out of the driveway, his mind went back to wondering about who this Heath Borjears character was. It seemed like he was some kind of detective, or rather a private investigator. He was obviously not afraid of getting caught doing anything illegal, since he took the time to detail his crime in the journal. He also wasn't afraid of curses or the paranormal, which was something he and Josh had in common. At one time in his life, Josh believed in all things considered supernatural, but that was years ago before he started making videos debunking those kind of things. It hadn't started out as a mission to disprove the paranormal, quite the opposite. His initial goal was to investigate things that many people just accepted as true and give a more solid base to things he believed. As he started digging, he found out that the things he thought were true didn't stand up to his more rigorous approach. One by one, the beliefs he had held for his entire life began to fall, until he stopped believing in anything outside of the mundane, though he never gave up hope that someday he might find something that would change his mind and make him believe again. The drive from his house in Newark to the cemetery in Killbuck wasn't too bad. Traffic was much lighter than he thought it would be, and he made it in less than 30 minutes. As he pulled into the surprisingly large cemetery, he began looking around for signs that anyone else was there. Pulling his car over to the side of the small road, he put it in park and shut off the engine. "Alright, I'm here. Now what?" He wasn't expecting a response, but almost as if on cue, a large flock of birds took to the air from around the small cluster of headstones in the back of the cemetery. Smiling at the thought of the birds hearing his plea, he climbed out of his car and started walking over to see what he could find. The natural beauty of the grounds took center stage over the morbid reality of what was below the surface. Flowers bloomed on many of the graves, and the bright sunshine danced off the petals as they swayed. Josh had always enjoyed the peaceful tranquility of cemeteries, and this one was definitely among his favorites already. Approaching the corner where the birds had been, one of the first things Josh noticed was the gorgeous statue that sat in the center of a small circle of headstones. Standing about 6 feet tall, it depicted Jesus surrounded by lambs and smiling at the sky. Though he wasn't religious, Josh always appreciated the artwork that he found in places like this, as it was part of the local culture and history. He had spent many hours wandering around cemeteries just like this one, reading the stones and taking in the brilliant sculptures. As he admired the craftsmanship of the work, his eyes fell to the edge of the cemetery where a line of stones met the growth of a forest. One stone in particular caught his eye, reading John Smith, 1789 to 1862. That all but confirmed it, but the question still remained. Who had led him here, and why? He now knew that the story in the newspaper had been based in at least some truth, but this didn't prove anything in regard to Heath being an actual person or the limbs being anything other than normal bone. What was the point of coming all the way here just to see a simple headstone? Sighing, he turned to walk back to the car, but stopped when a dark shadow moved in the corner of his eye. Turning his head in the direction of the figure, he saw a man ducking behind a stone 30 feet away. Unsure about whether the man knew he had been spotted, Josh began creeping in the direction of the stone, hoping whoever was back there would remain in place just long enough for him to get a good look. Though it only took about a minute or so to reach the stone, it felt like hours had passed when he finally reached it. Slowly, he made his way right up to it and braced for a confrontation. This had to be the person behind everything that had happened so far, and Josh was ready to find out who it was. Using every ounce of courage he had, he leapt around the back of the stone and reached for the stalker. The only thing he would grasp, however, was air. This didn't make any sense. He had seen the figure duck behind the stone, and his eyes hadn't left it since. There was nowhere for anyone to hide, and he would have seen them if they had run. Was he seeing things? Maybe there never was anyone there to begin with, and his lack of sleep was actually causing more problems than he realized. Reluctantly accepting the only logical explanation, Josh returned to his car and began making his way home. The thought of returning to the dark house didn't thrill him, but he knew he had to return sooner or later, and now that he had been to the cemetery, maybe the prankster would give him a break. As he pulled into the driveway, the porch light shining told him that either his wife and kids had returned from their trip, or the breaker had been flipped on by his mysterious friend. Walking in the front door, the answer became obvious when the overwhelming silence of the house greeted him. A quick search of the house revealed that there was no one else inside, other than the possible basement dweller, and the basement door remained locked. Heading to his office, Josh sat down and turned on his computer, crossing his fingers as it booted up. Once he logged in and was confident that the power was staying on, he opened his desk drawer and took out the journal. Booting up his recording software, his intent was to log everything that had happened in the past 24 hours and read the entry that started it all to his audience. Flipping through the pages as he prepared to press record, he found that the first entry was no longer the only entry. August 12, 1964. I thought I would be climbing on a plane today, going somewhere with a nice beach and beautiful women. Instead, I find myself in yet another job, and this one's a doozy. I caught up on some sleep and went into the office to let Samantha know how things went with the limbs so she could reach out to the client, then headed over to Margaret's to get a drink and catch up with James. Little did I know that James would not only volunteer me for a job, but offer to help me with it. He is retired. He should be staying at the bar and enjoying himself, not following me around on what feels like a job that isn't going to end well. I should probably add some info about the job, more so I don't forget the details later on when we wind up being arrested for kidnapping or murder. So, there I was, chatting it up with James when this good-looking woman comes through the door and walks up to the bar. James was obviously in love the moment he saw her, though he had to have noticed her clothes and hat were just a tad dated. Of course, because I used up all of my luck finding those damn limbs, she asked for me, and James sent her my way with a look that made me wish I could knock him into next week. But this wasn't a normal job. Oh no, that would be too easy. This job involves a missing person. To make an exceedingly long story short, or as short as I can, no wonder I used so many notebooks, the client's name is Dee, and she claims her daughter went missing about 6 months ago. I told her that this sounds more like a case for the police, but she said she had run out of patience with them because they keep telling her that the girl probably just ran off with a boy and will return when she feels like it. Dee doesn't buy this explanation, and to be honest, I have a hard time with it as well, as I have heard about cases like this too often where a body is found months or years later, and thinks that something terrible has happened to her. The daughter's name is Persephone, and her last known whereabouts are somewhere in north-central Ohio. Of course, it would be my home area. I was going to turn down the job because I don't get involved in missing persons cases as a rule, But James decided that he just couldn't stand by quietly like a good barkeep and told her we would take the job. I have nothing against my adopted dad, but he really needs to learn when to call it quits. Between that goblet a few years ago and now this, I think he is trying to make my life more difficult than it needs to be. After Dee left, I spent the next 2 hours trying to talk him out of it to no avail. So I guess this is the thing now, and James will be working the case with me. I was just glad he didn't offer to do it for free. More details about the girl. She is 5 foot 6 inches tall with light brown hair. Small frame, weighs somewhere in the ballpark of 110 pounds. Dee wasn't sure about the weight, so this is best guess. Had friends in Mount Vernon and Danville, a couple of other cities that Dee couldn't remember. Loved to hang out in cemeteries with her friends, was known to get passed out drunk in them from time to time, my kind of girl. Last time Persephone spoke with Dee was on February 27th or 28th, and she was planning to come home to visit at the end of March. Since it sounds like the police won't be of much help, I asked James to reach out to them. That should keep him busy for at least a few hours. My current plan is to visit a couple of places that Dee knew Persephone hung out, and look for some of her friends. I only have a couple of names to work with, so hopefully that will be enough to go on.